Good afternoon. Thank you for attending the California Department of Education's Learning Acceleration webinar for mathematics. Next slide. My name is Cheryl Cotton. I'm Deputy Superintendent of the Instruction, Measurement, and Administration Branch at the California Department of Education. Our State Superintendent of Public Instruction, Tony Thurman, and I are excited to have our panelists highlight learning acceleration strategies that are being used by local education agencies and community organizations to support student learning. The CDE is committed to supporting LEAs for local education agencies for activities that directly support academic achievement and promote learning acceleration and recovery in response to the COVID-19 pandemic and the persistent achievement and opportunity gap. Statewide, the percentage of students meeting or exceeding standards on the 2022 Smarter Balanced Summative Assessments declined by 7 percentage points from 40% to 33% for mathematics when compared to students who took the tests in 2018-2019 before the pandemic. An analysis of those students who tested in 2020-2021 for English language arts and math assessments indicates that recovery may already be underway. In the spring of 2021, about 25% of students in grades 3 through 8 and 11, or about 740,000 students, participated in the Smarter Balanced Summative Assessments for ELA and mathematics. An analysis of that cohort, looking at the same students who took the test in 2021 and comparing their results to 2022, showed steeper than normal achievement gains at most grade levels, a hopeful sign that the state's robust investments in accelerating learning are paying off. The CDE has created an online resource for LEAs to support their efforts to promote the learning recovery and acceleration via the Learning Acceleration and Recovery Resources webpage, which centralizes information for several programs that can be used to support learning recovery efforts. The CDE is pleased to support LEAs in this work. Next slide. This is the third webinar in the Learning Acceleration webinar series. More information is available on the CDE website. Please know that the chat has been disabled. However, if you have questions, please click on the question and answer icon and it can be added there. We will have individuals in the background monitoring the questions, which we will try to address during or at the end of the presentation. This webinar is to highlight learning acceleration strategies that are being used by LEAs and community organizations to support student learning. And with that, I would like to introduce our first presenter, Ellen Barger, the chair of the California County Superintendent's Curriculum and Instruction Steering Committee for Mathematics. She is also the Assistant Superintendent of Curriculum and Instruction at the Santa Barbara County Office of Education. Ellen is pleased to share what her county office and county offices across the state are doing to support learning acceleration in the area of math. Ellen, please go ahead and share your screen.
Thank you, Deputy Superintendent Cotton. As you said, my name is Ellen Barger, and I am Associate Superintendent of Curriculum and Instruction for the Santa Barbara County Education Office. And I come to you today as a 35-plus year educator, teacher, leader, administrator. In addition to being the chair of the SISC Mathematics Subcommittee for the California County Superintendents, I'm also the chair-elect. And I am a member of the intersegmental group, the CMEC, the California Mathematics Education Collaborative. And for those of you out there, member of TOTO, CMC, NCTM, and CSM, all of that. But probably most important, I was for more than half of those 35 plus years, a teacher and an instructional coach for mathematics. Also really important to me in all of this is my other identity, and I am the daughter of a mathematician as well. So I come to you with my life's work and something that's really important as we have this incredible opportunity. So today's webinar is about learning recovery and acceleration. And as many of you know, we have been looking at data, both in terms of our CASP scores, and the dashboard is coming out. And as Deputy Superintendent Cotton said, these are the release of last spring's test scores. And right now, what's happening in our districts, in our schools, in our community, is that we're seeing a lot of reactions somewhere between freaking out and blowing it off. And what we know is that there's a lot of space in between. But I think what's most encouraging and most promising as we are working with district and school leaders all across is that everyone is asking, how do these data inform us? What does it really tell us? And who holds the rest of the information we need to understand where we are on our recovery and on our learning, especially in mathematics? Just as important is this question, what is our opportunity in this moment? And so as I work with my county office colleagues all across the state in every region, and all of our district partners, our community partners, our partners at the California Math Council and in the California Mathematics Project, we're all asking these questions and coming together to say, what is our opportunity in this moment? And I think this quote is really, really important as we hear people thinking about looking at and turning to us with ideas for learning recovery and accelerating after learning loss. And so while most quotes on the internet are attributed either to Albert Einstein or Abraham Lincoln, we don't know exactly if this is what Einstein said, but it's important for us to remember that we cannot solve our problems with the same level of thinking that created them. And so it brings us to what is our worst fear and what is our greatest hope? And I guess one of our worst fears is that we will further harm our historically marginalized students and their teachers by continuing deficit-based practices that limit students' relationship with and their ownership of mathematics. What we don't want to see is students isolated, continue to be isolated, continue to be tested and have those things that they don't know continue to show up in their face, hold them back, and precisely think that we have to keep remediating these skills that were lost along the way. But what is our greatest hope? Our greatest hope is that as we look back on what happened in the pandemic, what happened when our students were no longer in community with one another, no longer in community with caring teachers and tutors and folks who really helped to build their mathematics community, that we truly recognize the important aspects of mathematical learning for students and teachers, and then intentionally build the conditions for collective healing and mathematical thriving. And so that greatest hope takes me to one of my favorite quotations from the draft framework, from the draft California Mathematics Framework. And it says that in this case, what we are working toward is that students benefit from viewing mathematics as a vibrant, interconnected, beautiful, relevant, and creative set of ideas. And as educators create opportunities for students to engage with and thrive in mathematics and value the different ways questions and problems can be approached and learned, then the outcome will be that many more students view themselves as belonging to the mathematics community. And so that idea of students belonging is really an essential piece of the work that we've been doing all across the state in various regions. And I'll share two resources that have been just so essential to that work. So for students to view themselves as belonging to the mathematics community, many of our friends and partners are using Seda and Brown's Choosing to See. My colleague Kendall Brown, who works with us in the SISC Mathematics Subcommittee and through all of those different areas, has really been leading some of these conversations along with Pamela Seda around this particular book. And I think what's so powerful is the acronym for building equity in the mathematics classroom. And that is this on the right, I See You Care. I'll give you just a moment to read each of those elements of the acronym to yourself. So throughout California, this Choosing to See, it's being used with leaders, administrators, and teacher leaders, and TOSAs and coaches through the 21 CSLA opportunities that are in each of the 7 hubs all over our state. It's being used with teacher teams who are reading and understanding. And one of the places that folks have even started to use it is in high impact tutoring. We know that this has to happen in the classroom, but it also has to happen in the expanded learning opportunities and in the high impact tutoring throughout. When we look at the research for high impact tutoring that comes from the Annenberg Foundation, we see that the 5 elements of the high impact tutoring, the high dosage, 3 or more sessions per week, the stated focus on the cultivating the tutor and student relationship, the alignment with school curriculum, the use of formative assessment strategy to monitor student learning, and the formalized tutor training and support. This becomes an essential element for building that relationship and what it means to train our tutors. In addition to this incredible resource, which is really part of students helping to see themselves as belonging to a mathematics community in the classroom and beyond the classroom. Another really important resource that we are doing work with all over the state is the Building Thinking Classrooms. I know that in various regions, we have many groups who are not just doing book studies, but are doing very focused work and really spending time with all of the 14 practices that are there to build the thinking classrooms. We are seeing how that is simultaneously changing the nature of what's happening in classroom, as well as the physical environment and the sense of where the authority lies. And so in terms of recovery and acceleration, these 2 elements we think are absolutely essential and universal across our state. So going to our greatest hope, one area is that many more students view themselves as belonging to the mathematics community, and that's true for teachers as well. But the other area is students benefiting from viewing mathematics as a vibrant, interconnected, beautiful, relevant, and creative set of ideas. And once again, I'll say that is not just essential for students, but it starts with teachers. And so, unfortunately, we can't just open our brains or insert the knowledge that we have for years to really take that love of mathematics that has come from deconstructing and reconstructing our internalized mental maps. But it really requires significant time and conditions for meaning making for students and for teachers. And I want to talk a little bit about what that means for teachers and put it in context, because I know my fellow panelists will talk more specifically about what that means for students. And I will say the diving into the building mathematical thinking is really what that's all about. So I'll talk a little bit about getting it wrong and getting it right. And I'll start with a short story about when I was a mathematics teacher. I was so gung-ho in helping my students. And at the end of each unit, I would painstakingly create this review sheet that showed all of the connections between all the mathematical ideas we had studied in that unit. And then I'd give that to my students, feeling so good for myself, only to realize that it was in the making of it that I just clarified my knowledge and my sense of that beautiful, vibrant connectivity. And so as a teacher, I had to learn to shift from doing it for my students to doing it with my students. The same is true for teachers. And what does it mean for teachers and educators? And so this concept of getting it right, really, as I think back over all of the really important experiences I had as a teacher, it was through the California Math Project, through the Math Renaissance, through the PLC work of working with other math teachers to make sense of this myself. And so for teachers, one of the things that we're seeing specifically in our county, and I know it's true from talking to our colleagues in other counties, as we look at our teacher induction programs and the number of new teachers, as we talk with our districts, we have a district in which 40% of their teachers have less than 3 years experience. What we come to realize is that we have many, many teachers whose only teaching experience has been over these last 3 years. They have not had that significant time with their colleagues in professional learning communities. So a big part of the work that we are also doing right now is combining the mathematical knowledge for teaching that we know that Deborah Ball has clarified over the body of her work, that is also informed by our California Math Framework, but also our work in professional learning communities to ask the questions about what do students really need to know and what does it look like and how do we respond? That work requires that teachers are given significant time with appropriate facilitation to allow them to engage in making sense of what is the really important mathematics at our grade and at the grades above and below us, so that when we are teaching and trying to provide students really great opportunities and tasks that are low floor and high ceiling, we know what the knowledge was that came before or that perhaps needs to be reactivated and where we're going with it. And so a huge part of this work is really thinking about what are the experiences that the teachers, the administrators, the tutors, the paraprofessionals, everyone working with students, what do they need to have so that they have this within themselves, as well as within, so that they can provide it for students. And so within the community, as we are building our communities of practice and we are starting to plan for the communities of practice grants, all of this is informing that work. Also with that, we can also turn to the digital learning and standards integration guide, as well as the forthcoming mathematics framework, to utilize the ideas of the drivers of investigation that you can see in the swirls, the content connections along the x-axis, and the mathematical practices that are listed there along the y-axis, how all of those come together in meaning making, not only for individual teachers, but for teachers collectively within a school, in a district, in systems, so that they can build this for our students. Similarly, we're working with the big ideas. And this is just one of the pictures of how the content connections and the big ideas of fourth grade come together. By using these elements, we can engage teachers together in the meaning making because there's no shortcut. It's great to have things like pacing calendars and all the things that we've made. But just like my students didn't benefit from all of what I did, they had to do it themselves. We need to engage our teachers in being able to make sense of these ideas with the kids in their classes, in their community, and based on their context as well. And so as we go back to our greatest hope and our worst fear, we really are committed to the collective healing and mathematical thriving of each and every student, as well as each and every teacher in our great state of California. And so for any more information on this, you can contact your county office of education and or your local California Math Project. My dear friend and colleague, Kendall Brown, couldn't be with us today, but I can also put you in touch with him as well. So thank you, and back to you, Deputy Superintendent Cotton.
Thank you so much, Ellen. I really appreciate that. Now we are going to hear from Jim Hollis, the Executive Director of the Calculus Roundtable. The Calculus Roundtable serves as an organization that focuses on supporting LEAs and students of color directly to address the achievement gap and promote learning acceleration in the areas of math. Jim, are you ready to share your screen?
I am.
Awesome, thank you.
Let me get it going here. Greetings, everyone. My name is Jim Hollis, and I am the Executive Director of Calculus Roundtable. We are a nonprofit organization dedicated to promoting math and science skills for students, particularly students of color. We consider ourselves a vertical education organization in the sense that we work on policy, research, and analysis with county offices of ed and school districts. We are always dedicated to including the community and their voice in all policy and research work that we do, along with curriculum. We work and train instructors, college fellows, and professional mentors of color in the STEM fields to work in classrooms. We build math articulation schedules for school districts and schools and do program development through working with teachers. That develops through a professional development workshops and professional learning communities with teachers and administrators. We provide support for teachers in the classroom, coaching on site. And what we call our secret sauce are 8 to 10 week student-centered, culturally inclusive courses that school districts purchase or are purchased through grant pass-throughs in many California schools and districts. In the 9 years of our organization, we have worked with over 20,000. I think that McDonald's number is ticking up to close to 25,000 right now, but we've worked with over 20,000 California students. The majority of them are African American and Latino. In fact, 80% of the students that we work with are students of color. We were very humbled to receive a Congressional Recognition Award for our work with STEM education in communities of color. And that's our story, and we're sticking to it. As I was looking at the questions and thinking about what we have done over the last couple of years, I think one of the most pivotal pieces that we've done is build what we call our STEM broadcasting network. And since we were doing a lot of online work before the pandemic and lots of activities where students gather their data and their work online, when the pandemic hit, we were very much prepared to move all of our programs online within a couple of days. And through that process, we ended up building this STEM broadcasting network, which is a collection of live classes of recorded self-paced instruction and virtual field trips. So in some cases, there are recorded materials around STEM fields from professionals in the field. We have live classes with professionals that work with individual students or groups of students, as I said before, in 8 to 10-week course settings. And then we do high impact tutoring, one-on-one live meetings with students over several times a week, one large classroom and then 2 tutoring sessions to make sure that we're hitting everything we need to do in terms of high impact tutoring. What that looks like for the students is they sort of sign into our STEM broadcasting network in their grade level, and they get a list of subjects and classes that are going on already within their school or within their region, and they have got a schedule where they're logging into active classes. Here's just a quick view of what one of those classes looks like. It's hard to sort of see some of this, but there's a scientist from NASA who's working with students directly on, in this case, it was on water. But what they focused on in this class was how is water used in outer space? A very sort of open conversation where we were able to plug into the International Space Station at the same time and see some of the devices that the scientist was talking about. So that level of live interaction, experts within the classroom and students leading a lot of the work itself gave us a great sort of ecosystem to work from through the pandemic. And in one school, what that looks like is a school I wanted to focus on in West Contra Costa in Richmond, California, called Nystrom. Nystrom is a school we've been working with for several years. When we got there for the 5 years previously, over 75% were far below basic in math. The community itself is called Iron Triangle, which tells you a little bit about the nature of the neighborhood. It's a very high crime neighborhood that is bordered by a public housing project and some community public living areas. And as we also know, that sometimes the most accurate indicator of a student's outcome is their zip code. So our work was really to try to break out of that mold by first doing a STEM asset mapping process where we looked in the community over 15 miles from the school and looked at every STEM organization and public museum and place that we could take the students on field trips or virtual field trips or bring some of the experts to the classroom. One of those places that we decided to go was the Paleontology Museum at UC Berkeley. But before that, we did many lessons and activities on dinosaurs, on food chain, on botany and geology and architecture, archaeology, and even 3D scanning of bones, which we would do at the museum with scientists. So when the students got there, they were not only ready to do the work and saw it not as a field trip, but as an extension of their classroom. They were able to work with kids from other schools who had worked on the same curriculum, giving them sort of an insight to other communities. They were able to work with scientists and PhD students and mentors at their own level. And they came to these events ready to work because they'd already done subject matter research or activities that were based on the event itself. The most recent one was we just took a bunch of students, thanks to the Disney Corporation, to a sneak preview of Wakanda, where we had sort of mapped out all the science that was in there before we went to the movie. So it was part of the curriculum and not just a free trip. What that did with many of our programs, like our Think Like a Game Designer, where game developers from Canada flew in and worked with elementary and middle school students to design new features for their games. And then they did some testing of new game procedures and wrote up specs for those games, which was the science and math behind it. And then we took a field trip to the corporate office in San Francisco and worked with computer programmers of color who were there, who worked with the students for a day and a half. Some of the kids, when we got to the headquarters in San Francisco, had never been in an elevator before. So there's all kinds of learning that happened in those trips. And of course, what happened? Were the far below math scores went down, and the more proficient math scores went up for the majority of students that we worked with in this program. So in that one school, we first started, as I said, to install fun but rigorous math activities, science activities, but even with the science activities, everything went back to math standards underneath. And from that, we initially saw the suspension rate in the school went down because kids wanted to stay in the program. And we saw after school participation going up, right in line with the math scores for the African-American students which we were working with go up, which then led to overall math scores across the school increasing as well. Looking at the real data from Smarter Balance, we see that for African-American students in the West Contra Costa School District during the time period that we were working, the average proficiency rate was 2.56, which is in the county, which has many other districts with less poverty, was still at only 5.68%. But the students at Nystrom in this one school that we worked with jumped to 11.5%, 3 times what the district average was for the same students in the same communities. Now, that didn't just come from field trips. It came from also aligning all of those fun activities that were student-driven with math standards. And we looked at math standards from the different grade levels, from elementary to middle to high school. But what we ended up really looking at more closely were the 7 domains of math proficiency and what components we could pull out that would be we could teach every student, no matter what grade level. So we focused on the first 5, which is math processes, patterns, algebra and function, and geometry and measurements, calculus and trigonometry, and statistics and probability, regardless of the grade levels. And we were able to pull 16 components out of there. Don't bother reading all of them. I can send these to you if you like, but 16 components out of those 5 domains that we felt like as educators, we could teach elementary, middle school, and high school students something about these so that they had a working knowledge of these fundamental formative skills, whether that be number theory or probability. We figured we could teach 3rd graders to high school students in those areas. And then we had a natural cultural competency because those students, instead of just hearing about what George Washington Carver did, perhaps, were actually doing the science and research themselves. So the cultural competency level of our STEM activities is having those students of color seeing people who look like them doing the math and science in union. And that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. Thank you for your time, and I hope to answer any questions later as we go on. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much, Jim. That was awesome. And knowing that it's giving kids joy, it's giving kids context and a deeper understanding of the concepts that they're learning made a difference in their achievement scores. It all makes sense, right? It all adds up. That was a math pun, if you didn't catch that. At this point, so thank you very much. At this point, we are going to hear now from Adam Clark. He is superintendent of Mount Diablo Unified School District. Dr. Clark brings his expertise as an instructional leader. He is a superintendent who is an instructional leader of a district of over 29,000 students. Dr. Clark, please share with us what Mount Diablo is doing to promote student learning and acceleration of learning in the area of mathematics. Dr. Clark, are you ready to share your screen?
Yes, I am. Thank you so much.
Thank
Just make sure, and I can see you, Deputy Superintendent Cotton. If you can just give me a thumbs up that you can see my slide. Beautiful.
Absolutely.
Great. So thank you very much. I'm very excited and honored to be part of this distinguished panel, and of course talking about something that is of an importance to all of us. So as
Mr. Clark,
yeah.
you are showing your presenter screen though, so it has your current screen and your next slide is showing right now.
All right, so let me stop that. And let me go here. How about this?
Perfect.
All right.
Thank you.
So in Mount Diablo, we as you mentioned, we have over close to 29,000 students, and even before the pandemic came about, our students were not scoring proficiently in math in all areas, and so it was something that we really wanted to take a close look at and focus on as we came out of the pandemic. And so what we've done is we have partnered with TNTP, which is the New Teacher Project, and we've worked with them on providing us some resources and some support with the learning acceleration. And we spent this time focusing on math. So we started off with all of our administrators and educators, and really we wanted to look at these kind of 5 essential components here. First, we wanted to define what the problem was. We wanted to examine possible solutions. We wanted to make a case for learning acceleration and define it, and then also talk about everyone's role within learning acceleration. As we all know, it is very difficult to break old habits, and as we had students who were entering back into face-to-face instruction, we had teachers, we had parents, we even had students who wanted to go back and learn previous material. And so it's sort of addressing that mindset was very important to get people to buy into this concept of learning acceleration. So the big questions was, how will we address the interruption of learning, and how will we address the social emotional impact had on our students? And we really wanted to do this through mathematics and how we approach teaching during this time with our students. So here is just a little bit of data, and just bear with me as we go through this. I'm going to pick out 8th grade here. And if we look at 8th grade, the solid line shows in a normal year, right? And so it's on an upward continuum until the last day of school. And this is on a regular year. And then during summer, we have the summer dip if students aren't participating in summer school or other activities, but it quite naturally dips during summer. And then the sort of broken line is with COVID and with the slowdown of attending school regularly and with Zoom school. And then we've also noticed the last line, which is the COVID slide, and you can see where once schools closed, where students really did start to slide. Some students started to slide in their academics, and specifically towards mathematics. And just really what I want to highlight here is that there are some students who fell nearly a year behind. So with that in mind, we had a considerable amount of work to do. So what are the possible solutions, and why is acceleration best for students? So historically, this is how most districts have dealt with, when students have that lack of progress in a particular subject, is we retain them, and we have them repeat the whole year, repeat units, it's that whole retention piece, and we often know the effects that has. And then there's social promotion, where regardless, they're going to move on to the next grade to keep them with their peers and keep them in age appropriate environments. And again, where where that might have some gains, it also has some some areas where students don't make up what they've lost. And then remediation, which is teaching them again, and teaching them content that students have previously failed to learn. So again, a lot of this is working with the adults to kind of embrace this concept of accelerated learning. So here was a document, and again, we're on a PowerPoint, so this is a live link. It is attached to to a research article. But really, what I want to point out here, and of course, you guys can read this on your own, but it's that opportunity myth. Is that what the study has found is when we meet students where they are as students re-enter after the pandemic. The well-intentioned, and again, we're doing this not from a punitive lens, we're doing this honestly to catch our students up or to teach them what they've missed. It practically guarantees they'll lose more academic ground and reinforces misguided beliefs that some students just can't do grade level work. And unfortunately, this tends to impact more at higher rates our students of color and students from our low-income families or students who are emerging bilingual. So this was a study that we shared with our staff and any parents who wanted to see it as well. And then this was another publication, and really what I want to point out here, if we just look over to the left side of the screen, is when students who started the year behind had greater access to grade level, grade appropriate assignments, they closed the outcome gaps with their peers by more than 7 months. And those two different charts there show you the difference between sort of that repeating, and then what happened when we expose students where they are to grade level standards. We see that they had a 7.3% growth over the 7.3 months gross compared to 1.7 months in growth. So shifting to learning acceleration. So when students have unfinished learning loss, interrupted instruction, gaps in previous grade level content, are not on grade level, the most effective way to catch students up to their peers is to prioritize grade level instruction and student work. And then during that time, provide those students with what we call JIT, which is just in time scaffolds and supports, and you're going to get mastery of grade level standards. So what we're ultimately saying is, if we have students who are in 4th grade, we're not going back and teaching them 3rd grade work or 3rd grade standards. We're really going to start in 4th grade and give them those just-in-time scaffolds to keep them on track with what's expected of them in 4th grade. So that was the mind shift that we've really been grappling with as an entire district. Just so we're perfectly clear, our whole district is going through this work. So what we have found is students who experience learning acceleration struggled less and learned more than students who started at the same level but experienced a remediation. And our students from underserved backgrounds, were more likely than their wealthier peers to experience remediation. So essentially, what was found in these studies were that even if students were from underserved communities, that even if they were mastering concepts and demonstrating mastery, they were still sort of placed back in this remediation role. And And then it was also found that learning acceleration was particularly effective for students of color and those from low-income families. So we bought all into this, and we've been going through considerable amounts of training. We're using a model of TNTP has trained our principals, and now our principals are training their staffs and working through these concepts. So what does this look like? So I know this is a very busy, very busy chart, but you can just sort of pick out where you want to jump in. But I'm going to focus on the bottom left is, learning acceleration, focusing on those priority standards. So again, there's going to have to be some work within your departments around standards. And one of the things that one example of how we're doing this is our principals are participating in their own PLC groups, and they are going out and visiting classrooms and honing their skills on being able to identify the grade level mathematical standards that are taking place in a particular class. So again, we're starting with that training of our principals, and that was sort of at the beginning of the year. And now, as we're at mid-year, our teachers are doing this same work where they're going and visiting their colleagues' classes and looking at those priority standards and making sure that all the activities within a particular grade level are those grade level standards. And I know that might sound like, yeah, that's what's supposed to happen, but you would be amazed if you really audited all your classes and all the assignments and all the materials if they all truly were grade level work. And again, there's a lot of work that has to be done within studying the standards and understanding the standards a little better. So I know this is a busy sheet, but there really is a wealth of information provided in there. And then again, we just come back here to our kind of our anchors, and what we've also found is that coherence. So as we're focusing on those grade level standards in every class, it's real important that that our coherence amongst grade levels and amongst classes are on board. So by doing this work, we can make sure that all of our third graders in a particular school are following a similar scope and sequence so that we can provide that support, not just individually, but again, we're always crunched for time, as all of our educators are. We only have a few professional development hours during a month, and so it's real important that we create those coherence either within grade levels or from third grade to fourth grade, third grade, second to third, and so on and so on. And I'm going to show you why that's important. So reviewing the previous grade level standards in a warm-up or mini lesson, that is a way that you can provide that just-in-time scaffold. And then explicitly connecting the previous content to our grade level standards, and then showing and exposing students to multiple ways to solve particular problems. And then here it is in action, essentially. So this is a fourth grade class, and at the bottom there is a fourth grade standard on multiplying fractions, on working with fractions. And so what we're working on with our teachers, and this is a lot what teachers are working on together, is if I'm this fourth grade teacher and my students may struggle with this concept, this is how I take that exact same standard, but it's at the third grade level. And so how can I implement that either in a mini lesson or in a warm-up or some sort of class discussion, right? So you have the third grade standard on the top, and then you have the fourth grade standard, which would be applicable for a fourth grade class. And again, so much of this work is shifting a mindset, and believe me, it is hard work for our teachers. And and although we fully embraced this year, we see this as a multiple year kind of commitment to this work and to this concept. And then these are just some live pictures of our teachers doing the work. And as we collect data on our common formative assessments around mathematics, this is our teachers implementing a protocol on that data. So again, what do you see? Let's describe the data. Again, as we're also looking at social emotional and equity. We're avoiding judgments. We don't want to interpret certain data from certain student groups. We really have to be explicit in this work as we're examining our students' progress. And go to the next slide. So what does the data suggest? What are the assumptions? What are the subtitles we make about students and their learning? How can we make sense of what the data is saying and why? Can we listen, offer interpretation, ask clarifying questions? And what implications of this work for teaching and assessment? What are those classroom practices? What are the next steps in your classroom? What strategies might be most effective? What are the implications for equity? So again, we put an equity lens on the work that we're doing, but hopefully this 5-10 minute presentation just gave you a whet your appetite for really what learning acceleration looks like in a K-12 public district with 29,000 students. So this is the work that we're taking on in Mount Diablo. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much. And I love a great protocol, Dr. Clark. Great protocol.
Right.
But it also kind of guides that conversation. So thank you for bringing data into this conversation as well. I want to express my appreciation for all of our presenters today. Your expertise and support of student learning is so valuable. I want to encourage those who are viewing today to complete the evaluation form, and that will help to give our planning team valuable information as we continue to provide ongoing webinars and guidance to support learning acceleration for California's 6 million students. And I want to be mindful of time. We can go back to the Q&A slide. I have one question if anyone wants to. It's a big question, but if you want to take just a minute to respond to it, we would really appreciate it. And this is kind of a combination of some of the questions that we sent to you previously. So our state superintendent, our legislators, and our governor has ensured that learning opportunities are provided for our youth, including an $8 billion investment specifically for learning recovery. However, more work and resources and investments are needed for particular student groups who have historically lagged behind, and we need to move all of our students forward at this time. It's also important to acknowledge the efforts of our students. They didn't lose anything. We had a pause in our learning. They were learning in different modalities in different ways, but they didn't lose anything. And I want to just highlight that and acknowledge that our kids come to school every single day and they are trying their best to learn and to grow. So let's just keep that in mind as well. But today we must focus on learning recovery and acceleration and build each student's mathematical identity. So my question to the group, if you want to tackle it, or if you have a couple words, how do we best support all students to develop a positive mathematical identity, given where we are right now?
Well, I'll take a quick stab, and I would just start off by saying that it really our adults who take care of our students, mainly our teachers and paraprofessionals. We really need to invest the time into them so that we make sure that they have the skills and the tools necessary to not have to overthink the work that they're doing, but to be able to focus on those relationships with kids and motivating kids, and then have the content, have the actual work that they're doing easy flowing, so that they're not managing multiple things, because they are the ones that are going to instill that love and joy of math into our students. So let's really, invest in our training and professional development. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Clark. Jim or Ellen, would you like to add on to that response? Then we're going to come to a close.
I'll go briefly, Ellen, so you can give us the big finale. But I would say, in terms of, we have to really talk about thinking about where students are. I heard a lot of discussion post-pandemic from school districts. We work with a lot of them who said, no more online learning. The kids hate that. And I go, really? Because they go home and play Minecraft for 4 hours. So I don't know if it's the platform. It might be the way that we're teaching it. we still have that concept of one big desk and 30 little desks, even in an online environment. And kids, young people are used to being interactive. We all watched media. Kids today make media. So we need to use math not in the sense of what this is going to do for you after college or how this is going to affect your pay when you're 40 years old, but how can I use these skills tomorrow? How can I use this in plotting out a new castle in Minecraft, which is all mathematics? So students are using mathematics in a very different contextual way that we are not teaching in school.
Love what you both said, Jim and Adam. And just to add to that, as we think about the structural, the instructional, and the cultural elements that come together in building students' mathematical identities, I think one of the most important things that we can do for our teachers first is de-weaponize the use of data and utilize Trabian Shorter's ideas about asset framing and really spend the time to get clarity about what our aspirations are and what those contributions have already been, just as you did at the beginning, Deputy Superintendent Cotton, and then talk about the obstacles coming together to know that these obstacles can be overcome by students and teachers and families working together and truly set up the situations where the adults learn from the kids learn from the adults, and we've facilitated that together so that we frame it in healing our community and thriving in mathematics.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you, Adam. Thank you, Jim. Thank you, Ellen, for your contributions today and your contributions every day for in support of our students. Thank you so much. This is bringing our webinar to a close at this time. I do want to let everyone who's listening know that we also want to remind you that our State Superintendent of Public Instruction, Tony Thurmond, the CDE and attendance work is also kicking off a series of 6 webinars to help schools and districts take steps to reduce chronic absenteeism. These are all interrelated, all connected and related. This series of discussions will expose how reducing chronic absence can be woven into key areas of existing work and will include the voices of practitioners offering concrete examples of how they combat chronic absence in their own schools and communities. So the first webinar will be coming. It's called Rising to the Challenge. It's going to be held on January 18th at 11 a.m. Registration information is coming out. You'll also be able to live stream it on our Facebook page, as this presentation was live streamed as well. A copy of this presentation will be on our CDE website so that we can always come back to it. You can also share this link once it's up, share it with a colleague. Make sure that folks are listening and hearing and learning about the resources that are available, the thinking behind, the protocols, the ways to look at data to support student learning as well. I so appreciate the 3 of you. Thank you so much for your time today, and look forward to our next webinar coming in January. And please, 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 please complete our evaluation form that gives the planning team great information of what our next steps need to be. All right, thank you so much. And this concludes our presentation for the evening. Have a wonderful evening.